Sophie had come to the coastal town of Serifko seeking quiet. A struggling artist, she needed time away from the chaotic city life to find inspiration. The small, sleepy town was perfect, with its old stone buildings, craggy cliffs, and soft, salty breeze. It wasn't until a sudden storm rolled in one evening that her peaceful getaway took a turn. The clouds had gathered quickly, and within an hour, the waves crashed against the shore with increasing fury. Sophie stood on her balcony, watching the dark sky, feeling both awe and unease. As the wind picked up, the power flickered out, leaving the entire town in darkness. Sophie grabbed a flashlight and prepared to wait out the storm. Please subscribe to our channel, thank you. Suddenly, a knock on her door broke her thoughts. She opened it to find a man standing there, drenched and holding a guitar case. "I'm sorry to disturb you," he said, his voice warm despite the storm's roar. "The storm's cut off the road, and I need a place to wait it out. I saw your lights and thought I might ask if I could stay until it clears up." Sophie, caught off guard but moved by his vulnerability, nodded, "Of course. Come in." He introduced himself as Caleb, a musician who had been traveling the coast for gigs. They spent the next few minutes making small talk, but the storm seemed to make the room feel more intimate, the darkened world outside drawing them closer. He explained how he had been on his way to a performance when the storm had forced him off the road. Sophie and Caleb quickly found themselves talking like old friends. The quietness of the house contrasted with the storm's violence outside, and the two seemed drawn together by the rhythm of the storm. Caleb strummed his guitar softly, the music filling the gaps between their words. Sophie was surprised by how easy it felt to talk to him, her usual reserve softened by the warmth of his presence. "I never thought I'd end up here," Sophie admitted as they sat by the window, watching the storm rage outside. "I came to the coast to get away from everything. To find some peace." Caleb looked at her, his eyes soft. "I think we all need that sometimes, peace. Or maybe just a break from life's noise." Sophie smiled, feeling a connection she hadn't expected. "I'm an artist," she explained. "Sometimes, I feel like I'm chasing a feeling that's always just out of reach." Caleb nodded knowingly. "Music is the same way. You try to capture something that can't be held, something that lives in the spaces between the notes." The storm outside seemed to match their conversation. Thunder cracked, lightning illuminated the sky, and the sound of the rain pounding against the roof became the backdrop to their exchange. Sophie, usually a private person, found herself opening up, something about Caleb's quiet confidence making it feel safe to share. Hours passed, and the storm showed no signs of abating. By the time the rain eased into a steady patter, it was late, and the two of them sat in front of the small fire Sophie had started in the hearth. Caleb had played a few songs, the soft music creating a comforting atmosphere in the cabin. He wasn't famous or well-known, just a man with a guitar and a lot of heart. "You've got a gift," Sophie said, her eyes bright. "The way you play, it's like the storm isn't just outside, it's in your music." He smiled, a little shy. "Music's always been my way of feeling. Grounded, I guess." Sophie turned toward him, intrigued. "What do you mean?" "I don't know how to explain it," Caleb said, looking at the flickering flames. "When I was younger, music was the only thing that felt real. Everything else, life, work, people, it all seemed so uncertain. But music always gave me a place to stand." Sophie listened, understanding the weight of his words. Her own struggles as an artist had often felt the same. The outside world was full of expectations, but art, whether through paint or music, was something that allowed for freedom, a safe place in the storm of life. As the storm began to subside, the air outside became crisp and fresh. The sky still rumbled with the occasional low thunder, but the worst had passed. Sophie and Caleb stood outside on the porch, looking out at the dark horizon. The waves had calmed, and the once violent ocean now seemed almost peaceful. Sophie took a deep breath, inhaling the salty air, and closed her eyes. It's hard to believe that all that chaos was just outside a few hours ago, she said. Caleb, standing beside her, turned to face her fully. Sometimes things have to get chaotic before they settle down. It's like life, you know? The storms come, and we think we won't make it through, but when they clear, we're left with something more beautiful, something clearer. Sophie looked at him, feeling the weight of the moment. She hadn't expected to meet someone like Caleb, someone who spoke her language of music and art, someone who understood that stormy places could create room for new beginnings. He reached out, almost hesitantly, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad I ended up in your little corner of the world tonight. Sophie smiled, heart fluttering. Me too. Just as Sophie and Caleb were beginning to talk about what they might do once the storm passed completely, an emergency alert came through on Sophie's phone. The storm had caused severe flooding along the coastal roads, and the town was officially cut off from the outside world. Authorities had warned that it could be days before the roads were cleared. At first, Sophie felt a pang of uncertainty, but Caleb seemed oddly calm, as though this unexpected turn of events was merely another chance for them to bond further. Guess we're stuck here for a while, Caleb said, a small grin playing on his lips. Sophie chuckled nervously. It's not exactly the vacation I planned. They quickly realized, however, that their isolation wasn't a bad thing. In fact, it provided them with an unexpected opportunity to grow closer. With no distractions, they spent the next several days in the quiet peace of each other's company, Caleb playing music, Sophie sketching, and them sharing long conversations deep into the night. The world outside remained trapped in the storm's aftermath, but inside, a new world was beginning to take shape. The isolation allowed their connection to grow deeper. What had started as a chance meeting in the midst of a storm now felt like fate. But it also raised questions. Would their feelings last once they were no longer trapped by circumstance? Could a romance born from such an intense situation survive the reality of the world outside? As the storm finally passed and the roads cleared, Sophie and Caleb were left with a choice. Caleb had to return to his music career, and Sophie had to face her art once more. But the time they had spent together in the storm had changed them both. Their bond was no longer just a fleeting encounter. It had become something real and undeniable. I'm glad I met you, Caleb said, his gaze soft but sincere. This was unexpected, but in a good way. Sophie nodded, feeling the weight of the decision hanging in the air. Me too. I've learned a lot from you about music, about life, about myself. They stood there for a moment, the air fresh and clear. The storm had passed, and with it, so much more had shifted. Caleb took a step forward and gently took Sophie's hand. Maybe we'll meet again, maybe in a different kind of storm. A better one, Sophie smiled, her heart racing. Maybe we will. And with that, Caleb turned to leave. But the storm had already left its mark on both of them, not just the one outside, but the one that had reshaped their lives. They knew their paths had crossed for a reason, and perhaps, one day, they'd cross again. The end. Please subscribe. Thank you.